The whole holiday is lost on me.
Probably give out the hat.
I won't promise to drink a green margarita, though.
I was looking for the picture. Twist my arm.
I make a mean margarita, Bob.
We should start early before meetings.
We have better meetings.
So I think
Yeah,
we could understand this, but we have our own acronyms.
but we have fun.
Pound the gavel.
Yeah, I brought you some.
Good afternoon. Welcome to the March 16th meeting of the Transportation Advisory Committee. We have a quorum, and let's begin with introductions. Jennifer.
Jennifer Irvin, El Paso County, County Engineer.
Laura Pellegrino, City Planner, City of New Park.
Mike Kozak, Community Planner at Ridgemount Airport Station.
Jennifer Baumgartner, Engineer, USAPA.
Darren Rosemeyer, Schriever Air Force Base.
Brandy Williams, City Engineer, City of Fountain.
Ken Prather, PPACG.
Wendy Pettit, CDOT Region 2.
Hello, Maria Sabata. I'm the CDOT CFO.
Michael Snow, CDOT Planning Liaison.
Wade Burkholder, Managing Street.
Albert Asfitch, Town of Palmer Lake.
Victoria Chavez, El Paso County.
Brian Vituli, City of Colorado Springs, Mountain Metropolitan Transit.
Prime, may I make a administrative request? We're still learning people, so as you make a motion or second on any action items, if you would help to remember to identify yourself. We're trying to make sure we get it right, because although we pick up all the recordings of what's said, we can't identify who's speaking necessarily, so we're trying to catch it during the meeting. And if you would also please make sure that when you're speaking, the blue light is on your microphone, otherwise your voice is not picked up.
All right.
Thank you.
Audience, would you like to introduce yourselves, please?
Gary Erickson, Copper Ridge Metro District. Alex Brown, Copper Ridge District.
And Tim Mitros, Copper Ridge.
Jim Moore, CAC.
Anton Ramage, El Paso County, Deputy County Engineer.
And PPACG staff?
Bethany Schumer, PPACG.
Jessica McMullen.
Kevin Rest.
All right, thank you. We're going to do a slight tweak, actually I'm requesting a slight tweak to the agenda. Maria is here from CDOT headquarters to do a brief presentation or answer some questions for us. So we'd like to move item 8B. So she'll be bundled in with the NOPE Policy Steering Committee update. And I'd like to handle that item first so she can get on the road, and then we can continue on. So could I have a motion?
I move to approve the agenda with that change.
And a second?
Second.
All in favor?
Jennifer Irvin and Victoria Chavez.
All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? All right, thank you. Comments for items not on the agenda? All right, seeing none?
Well, actually, could I?
Yeah, absolutely.
I just wanted to mention that my deputy county engineer, who just started on Monday, is here today, and so I just wanted to, he introduced himself at the beginning, but just wanted to welcome him. We will be adding him to this committee, so he's visiting and seeing what we are all about today, so thanks, Anton, for coming.
So you pushed him into the deep end right at the beginning, huh?
Right? Figure you guys are kind of tired
Welcome.
of seeing me, so
right.
Thanks.
Sure. Okay, item 4, approval of the February TAC meeting minutes. Are there any comments or changes suggested?
Would move approval of the February 16th, 2017 minutes. Jennifer Irvin.
And a second?
Second, Victoria Chavez.
All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? All right, thank you. Board of Directors report for the March board meeting.
There weren't many items on the board. They ratified TIP administrative change number 3 and approved TIP amendment number 7. And then they had a discussion item at the last thing of the meeting almost on the FASTER and HSIP projects that were presented to you last month, or to us. That's it for the board.
All right, any other questions for that? And I just wanted to thank Brandy again for attending the board to represent the TAC. So thank you, appreciate it. All right, so item 8B, we'll handle that next. Let's start it off with a brief update from Kevin. We just had our second NOPE steering committee meeting, or task force meeting, and we actually, since some of the issues go beyond the NOPE policy, we suggested changing the name to the TIP Policies Task Force. So it has a new name, but not as catchy as an acronym as the NOPE policy. So maybe we'll come up with something. But go ahead, Kevin.
Good afternoon, Kevin Reyes, Transportation Planner here with PPACG. So as Brian just mentioned, we are considering changing the name of our task force to the TIP Policy meeting, and we had a really good conversation today amongst everyone who attended. We also had a couple of CAC members attend as well. And if you recall the list that that we discussed with this committee over a period of several months with regarding the potential alternative policies to adopt, we first touched on that and talked about any additional policies we want to add to it. We did add a couple additional policies to that as well, and so we got that up to 17 policies to consider, and now we're just starting to narrow down that list and figure out which policies out of that entire list do we want to kind of remove and which ones do we really want to kind of focus in on and consider a little bit more. So kind of for everyone's homework in that committee, I'm sending them the updated list, and they have to send me their own prioritization of the policies in there. So they're going to send it, if the policy is in green, then they want to keep it. If it's in yellow, then maybe we would consider getting rid of it. If it's in red, then we'll take that off the table. So that's kind of the next step. So for next month's meeting, I think we're going to be able to really start focusing in on just a few policies to really start refining, and then we'll hopefully have a recommendation within the next month or 2 months. So I don't know if you guys have anything else more specific you want to add.
Do you want to talk a little bit about our conversation?
Go ahead.
Oh, you want me to do that? Okay. We did talk a little bit, too, with our CAC members. We have 2 different CAC members that are attending those meetings now. And we had a really great conversation about why we're doing this, what the issues are that we've been facing, the issues with the cost increases and just the policies and the process of going along with this. We had a really great conversation that allowed us to present sort of our TAC perspective on how this is all happening and why it's happening. And then we heard back from our CAC members about some of their concerns. And we've come to the realization that we've just not been doing a great job of communicating with each other as 2 different advisory committees to the board. And so I think we've started off with a really great conversation that's building on new relationships and building a new trust between our 2 groups. So I want to thank you for letting us have that conversation, too.
Yeah, absolutely. It was overall a pretty productive meeting. When we were, as Brian said, it goes way beyond the scope of just the NOTE policy now. We're able to address a lot of other issues that have just kind of been untouched for a while. So, and with that, I think one of the policies that we discussed at length was CDOT's Cash Management Advanced Construction Policy, and I think we'll have a representative here talk a little bit more on that. We can take that information into our next meeting and kind of use that for that. So.
Thanks, Kevin. So, Maria, we can keep this as formal or informal as you want. If you have a presentation, or if you just want to let us bounce questions off of you, or if you want to start by giving us a summary of that cash management item, however you want to handle it.
So I did not prepare a presentation
Okay.
for today. My preference is to field some of the questions that you may have. I think also, if we have time, if there's interest in understanding a little bit about the House bill that was recently introduced regarding funding, I think I can shed some light on that if you'd be interested as well. I think there's some things that are publicly, we're able to speak about publicly. I can give you an update about cash management and what it's meant to CDOT, because I think I've been here twice, and I think the first time I came was as the budget director, talking about cash management and what it meant to CDOT. And certainly that was, it's been a journey, to say the least. Would you like me to kind of tell you where we're at as far as our cash balance and whether or not it's working? Okay, good. All right, I'll do that first. So when I joined you, probably almost 3 years ago now, I remember I had just had a meeting with STAC, and we talked about cash management, and it was really baffling to everyone, including myself at that time. I was pretty new, probably 6 months in. So I knew we had a problem. You know, we had a huge cash balance, $1.5 billion, because we followed the gold standard according to FHWA, and whereas we saved all of the money that we needed for a project before we actually paid for it. Most of the states in the United States, I've found out since, and Shaylin has really talked about, use cash management. It wasn't called that, you know, in those particular states, but what they do is they actually align the STIP to the actual year of expenditure, which is basically what cash management is. So rather than save up all the money, because we're continuously appropriated, FHWA allows us to do a four-year STIP, rolling STIP, and we actually identify the actual expenditures by fiscal year, and we're able to, obviously, in 1 year, start more projects, in effect. And it's been incredibly successful. It's been a lot of work, but the cash balance sits today at approximately $250 million. And so we're a year ahead of schedule, but there are a lot of controls that need to be in place to make sure that we know that we are not going to run out of cash. And that sounds a little scary, but it truly isn't when the controls are in place, because we are very aligned with the contract writers, with the consultants that are doing the work. We have a program management office now headed by Jane Fisher, and I feel very confident that we have worked very hard to make sure our drawdown schedules, I mean, that's one of the inputs that is required to be pretty accurate, and I mean, there's obviously going to be ranges of accuracies and assumptions in a model, but based on information provided to us from the field, we're able to input that into a model and map out for the next 36 months what we expect our drawdown curve to be, and we compare that to when we expect to get cash in the door from state and federal funds. And we have a 36-month projection that we provide to the Transportation Commission every month in an information packet. And we compare that to a threshold balance that we established through policy, I believe, in July of this year. We actually went forth and said, here is our recommendation by month of what we think the cash balance should be based on seasonality of projects. So you might presume that in the summer months, obviously when construction season is very high, we want to make sure that we maintain a higher minimum balance. That balance is $300 million. And if we drop below that $300 million, we have a process in place well in advance. Like I said, 36 months in advance, we're looking at this so that we can decide whether or not we need to identify a project that might be held up due to NEPA and perhaps call that out and say, okay, we're going to move it out in the model so that we are not in that risk zone. Or if we don't have projects that are naturally delayed, we might decide to delay a particular project. We are not at that point yet, and again, we're monitoring that every month, and we would have those conversations with the regional transportation directors, and I would also presume that the PMO within each of the regions would be talking to the planners at that time so that there could be an adjustment if there needed to be. So it's working really well, and we do use advanced construction. I will tell you, the tool, I mean, FHWA allows us to do that because we are continuously appropriated. Where we have to, again, keep our eye on the ball is if we're under a continuing resolution, which we are right now, and we can't be assured that we're going to receive the money or receive the ability to bill the feds, that would be another reason that we would have to slow down a little bit, because if we run out of the ability to bill the feds, we have to take it out of state funds. And when we were in Washington a couple of weeks ago, we met with U.S. senators and congressmen to discuss transportation funding. It's an annual trip that we make, annual journey we make to talk with them. Shaylin was going to talk to somebody who goes, okay, what's our advanced construction balance, and when is this a problem if this we don't get the continuing resolution in April? Because this past October, we did not receive all 500 million that we typically do in October. They put us on continuing resolution, and we're expecting that to come through in April. I said, let me just, I think it's fall that we would run out of state cash, and then we'd really have to put the brakes on, but let me double check. And my team was able to get back to me within 5 minutes. I mean, that's how closely we're monitoring it. So cash management, we have tools that we can use in order to put more construction onto the road sooner. But some of the questions that I think Mike gave me, I might have to clarify kind of how you utilize them. So that might be something that we move into, some of the questions that you had asked him to maybe bring back to me. I guess with that, are there specific questions about cash management, per se, how we utilize it at CDOT that I might be able to answer?
Well, I think, this list that Kevin was alluding to, it's a list of alternatives that we're developing and considering that would take the place of this note policy, or how we deal with cost overruns and other issues. So we have use of the cash management strategy as an alternative, and I guess a lot of us really want to know if that is truly an alternative that we can use. Is it something that is actually something that we could use to help us with this situation? Is that
So
summarize it pretty
I
well?
want to make sure I understand the question correctly, or the issue correctly. So you have multiple projects that you want to get done within a specific time period, but some of the projects within that time period, the costs are higher, right? And so you want to know whether or not you can use cash management to be able to fully fund those projects, but continue the work on the projects that you've identified for a certain period of time. Do I understand that correctly?
Yes. Yeah.
I think, when we were talking about cash management around CDOT, because they're projects that CDOT decided to manage on a statewide basis, it made it a little bit easier to implement cash management. And I recall at the time, I think I said the principle could certainly work, but I think I guess you'd have to understand within within the Council of Governments, you would have to have coordination between the locals within your area, and I think that's what poses the challenge. I think you can do it. I think there's just a lot of things that a lot of communication has to take place so that everybody understands. And not unlike what CDOT actually experienced, right? Because I think at the time, the perception was, with all of this money that was in the bank, would those projects ever get done? And that was something that I didn't mention to you. We actually did an analysis of all of the projects that comprised that $1.5 billion cash balance, and the majority of them, over 70%, were already completed. And there were more, and there were delays, but they were still going to be funneling through the process. So we were able to go back to STAC and present that information that those projects actually got done. And that was one of the biggest questions that I received. It's like, you're going to use my money that I saved up and put it towards these new ramp projects. Those are never going to get done. We were able to do them simultaneously because we implemented an incremental encumbering policy where we would encumber only that year's expenditure, so we could start multiple projects or get them into the works. You absolutely can do it. It's really the communication to the constituents and to the locals about how the selections are being made and the process you're using to make sure they all stay in there.
Explain to them what the drawdown is all about, because that's a big piece of making it work.
So the drawdown schedules, we actually require all of the regions to provide to us, and an as accurate as possible schedule of when they actually expect to expend funds on a project in all phases. And it's absolutely critical to the process. We're still working on the accuracy of that, to say the least, but I think that we're getting there. Jane Fisher is our new PMO, and she's working very diligently with the regions to make sure. Cash management will not work if you are not able to have reassurance that the spending schedule that is presented to you is close to accurate. Because if someone speeds up and it's not communicated, that's where the challenge is in having the cash funds available to be able to pay the contractors. That's why the process really has taken, 2.5 years to evolve, because there were so many people who needed to provide information to the Division of Accounting and Finance to make sure that we could build these models, to make sure that no construction project that was let would go unfunded if the money was spent. So that's a challenge. Does that answer the question? Yeah, that's probably the trickiest part of this whole thing, is the coordination between the planners. I mean, it goes all the way from the planners, because the STIP is now different. We've got a 4-year rolling STIP, and it's by year of expenditure. So you'll see the same project in the STIP 4 years in a row, but they're going to show the dollar amount, what's fiscally constrained within those years is what actually is going to be spent on the particular project. So it goes all the way from the planning, all the way to the payment to the contractor and the closeout of the project.
Ken?
Maria, we had a meeting just before this meeting in which Wendy clarified some issues for me. Yeah, I was under the impression under cash management, say we got a $3 million project, $1 million a year, that we could reach forward and grab those $2 million and put them in the first year and pay for it. And it never dawned on me that if you're paying for it in the first year, you're writing checks to the construction company, those checks can't bounce.
Right.
You've got to have, as you're talking about, that cash reserve of $300 million that
That's right.
never dawned on me that aspect existed. For the MPOs to get involved with cash management, would we be able to use and be included in your cash reserve process, the CDOT process, or would we have to have our own cash reserve of some type?
Okay. So hopefully I can clarify this. It's pretty complicated. So the reason that we're able to do cash management, like I said, is because we're continuously appropriated, and we expect to receive those funds in year 2 and year 3. We can only spend, we haven't changed our one-page budget where it's revenue in, revenue out. So the cash reserves are there in the event, like I had mentioned with continuing resolutions, if we don't have the ability to bill the feds, our state funds would be used to temporarily augment those payments, or to pay for those funds until we could bill the feds. I wouldn't say, or you're correct, if there was an overrun, if something wasn't estimated correctly, or a contractor, there wasn't communication and the drawdown was incorrect and they went ahead, yes, the cash reserve would be used for that. Our goal is to avoid that happening, because again, we've filled the coffers all the way through. Like we've taken into consideration that year of spending on more projects than we used to in the past. And so we're not dipping in to spend 3 years' worth of work in 1 year. Does that make sense? I'm trying to, what's another way to put it? So, let's see. With RAMP, we increased our construction program by $250 million a year. However, in our budget, I can only show revenue in and out one time. I can't show it twice, right? So what we did in the STIP is we said, okay, these projects, we're going to spend 1 year in this year, the next year of construction in the second year, and third year. We aren't pulling forward the revenues that we'd get from the next 2 years. We're saying we're only going to spend that 1 year. Yes, we increased the number of projects that we're letting, but the dollar amount is right in line with our revenue. Otherwise, we wouldn't be fiscally constrained within the STIP, according to FHWA, if that makes sense. The cash balance gives us a buffer in the event we have a cost overrun that is unexpected. If we decide that we want to add scope to a project, I suppose we could do that, but it's a conscious decision to do that. Or we have to go back to the commission for a contingency request, which we do that quite often if we've got a cost overrun and it's justifiable. Does that? I don't know if that's answering your question.
I think
It's
so.
tricky. It's very tricky.
And your drawdown reserve, that's separate than the commission's emergency.
In part, yes, in part. I mean, we look at it in total.
Okay.
However, those dollars are put away in a pool, and if monies were going to be spent, it would have to be a special request. It's still part of our cash balance in total.
But the most important part is the accuracy, so that means you have to do all the design work up front. You can't do what we do now, where you come in with a good direction and an estimate. You'd have to have an exact estimate to be able to engage in the cash management. That's what's been so difficult for us as a department to get our arms around, because without that good information, Maria could never make that model work. So we finally have gotten, with the PMO office, the project management office, and all the cooperation of all the different engineers that we have statewide, to get that information good and in the places that it needed to be, so that when they need to push the button gets pushed, and the data that's flowing is accurate. So if you want to participate in that, you have to do the work up front. So as we discussed earlier, that becomes a cost to the local to do that.
I'm looking through the set of questions to see if there's something I didn't cover.
So basically, it is an option, but there's kind of a burden up front on the locals.
Expensive option.
Yeah.
It is. It's complicated. I'm thinking about, you're talking about the balance. So the range is 150 to 300 is where, so if you looked at our graph, and I wish that I would have brought it for you, but you can see that it goes up in the months. We want a higher cash balance in the summer, and then it dips down in the fall, and then it goes back up, And it was funny because when we took it to the Transportation Commission, I think they would like it if we only maintained a $50 million cash balance. But the fact of the matter is we spend on average $128 million a month, and that's an average, it's seasonal. But my concern always was, well, this is new for CDOT, and I don't know that at this point I'm willing to go to $50 million. Maybe in 3 years, after I know that we're getting accurate drawdowns and it's running like a well-oiled machine, I'll be more, I'll feel a little bit more comfortable. The other thing we have to remember is spending authority, too, and that we're in the middle of developing a spending authority forecast as well. It is typically at this time of the year that we start to feel the crunch, and I can only imagine how the employees at CDOT would feel if I said, well, gosh, we have the cash, but we don't have the spending authority to pay you. I just don't think that would work. And the contractors, too, but I tend to think about the employees first. And so that's the other thing that we're working on a forecast for that, because we do have the requirements of the state. We only have the spending authority, again, given to us within a fiscal year that we also have to monitor. And I mention that because it says to set aside a pool of money that can be used for cost overruns, and that was one of the questions that was asked. Obviously, that isn't the principle of cash management. It's quite the opposite. You want to be spot on so that you don't have to carry money in the bank. I mean, yes, it's collecting interest at the state treasurer's office, which, by the way, we felt a bit of a burden when our revenues, when we actually lowered the cash balance by about $15 million. So, that was a drawback, right? We had $15 million less to allocate to programs because the cash wasn't generating any interest anymore. So we learned that the hard way. Fortunately, revenues were up in other areas, so fortunately we didn't have an issue when we went to balance the budget this year. But I say that because it's, like I said, the commission would like us to keep a $50 million balance because they don't believe we should be holding money. We should be putting it on the roads, quite frankly.
Maria, my thought, what I'm thinking about is, clearly it's possible for CDOT to exercise the type of cash management you do because CDOT manages all those projects. You have the accountability and communication within a single entity. For Pikes Peak to do that, you would have to establish that very, very tight communication and accountability to one another amongst entities. But would there not also be an additional, Pikes Peak exercising some of those exercises would be an additional risk to CDOT's very cash management practices. So what does that look like? What, is that exceptionally challenging, or is that just something that would be built into our MOA or planning MOAs, and,
Yeah.
how complicated is that?
I think, well, I think the size of the projects that you're working on relative to the size of the projects that, for the asset management budget, I'm not certain. Yeah. I didn't want to say that.
No, they're really small.
I did not want it to make it
in
seem
your
that it was
world.
disrespectful, but it is, relative to the size of our budget, I think it's manageable, and I think there would be room for error if you wanted to start this, just as long as we stayed in communication, right, while you were trying to get it underway. And I definitely think, there's a lot of lessons learned that we could share with all of you, and there's a lot of skeptics out there about this process. Still, right? So just the communication side of it is key, but we certainly think, it could be manageable. And I remember being asked, when I first talked about cash management, I think the MPOs and TPRs were thinking about doing this because they see it as a way to do more every year, right? And tell our constituents that we're doing more. So it's a great thing. It's just, it has to be coordinated well.
Randy?
So CDOT, from what I understand, you can kind of bank on X number of dollars that's coming in every year. I don't see that we can bank on X number of dollars coming in and being cash in hand every year. So do you think, given that it's not exactly oranges and oranges, that we could implement this, or would we have to put in another layer, given the uncertainty of the amount of money that's actually going to be cash in hand year over year?
So help me understand that a little bit more. When we do the STIP, and it's the rolling four-year STIP, we have an idea of the projects that have been identified in all of the regions at that time, right? Mm-hmm. So I think given that, the fact that we've got the four-year rolling STIP and those projects have been identified, I think you could take advantage of it. Because we know, in relative terms, we know. There's no guarantee that we're going to have the revenue either, right? It's continuously appropriated, so, as long as the FAST Act is in effect, I feel fairly comfortable. I remember when we were doing this, and it was MAP 21, and we didn't know what was happening. I thought, oh, this is a great time to be implementing this, right? I don't know what there's going to be. And we're out there saying, let's do all these projects. So there's a healthy bit of risk in anything, I think, that you do like this. But I think it'd be reasonable, again, as long as the processes were in place.
And then correct me if I'm wrong, but are we ever ahead of schedule, or are we normally behind schedule? How many times does someone have a project and all of a sudden it's done 6 months early? Anybody? No, I hear nothing. So since you said that was kind of the thing to look out for, as long as we're perpetually, not that we want to be, but behind schedule, we should reduce the likelihood of getting ourselves upside down.
Never say never.
I know. Well, that's what I'm saying.
Yeah, no, but obviously that would be less of a risk then. It's just if by chance you're surprised, right? Then you could be left in a bad position. So it's more of a managing of the checkbook in a sense, right? It's funny because we talk about it's kind of like a house mortgage. I remember when we were out there, we were trying to talk about relative things. You go out and you borrow money to build a home or buy a home, and you're thinking about the revenues that you're going to have in the future to pay for that more. It's the same concept. So you budget in a particular year for clothing, food, whatever, and you only count that 1 year that you're going to be paying for your mortgage. That's really what cash management is, because next year's revenue is going to pay next year's mortgage.
It's a just-in-time process.
It really is. It really is. But the tools are there for you to do it, and certainly we would be very happy to help you figure that out, work with Wendy and all of you to kind of see behind the scenes what the team and the Division of Accounting and Finance has to do. It's a healthy burden. I mean, I won't say that it's not, but it works.
Are there any other questions or comments for Maria while she's here? Or Maria, do you have anything else for us?
So there were some questions, and I didn't know. I know these are the list of issues, but I'd asked a couple of my folks to put together some thoughts behind the steep increases in costs in future years. Are you interested in knowing from an economist what the proposition is?
Yeah.
Okay, so this is newsflash. Cost of project delivery has been increasing in the last 5 years. So the change in our construction cost index between 2012 and 2016 is currently 20%.
Wow.
The inflation model is showing an average of a 6% increase annually in the near future. And difference between the planning estimates or the initial estimates, engineering estimates, and actual award amount differ, partly due to the failure to update cost changes over time, and it's the years in the STIP. I mean, that's causing it, right, because we're looking at a 4-year now. And so, that's something that I think we're going to be talking about as it relates to the new piece of legislation, too, because I don't understand it completely, and I would like to spend a little bit of time letting you know about the funding bill, the transportation funding bill that was dropped last week by Speaker Duran. It calls for us to receive a stagnant amount over the next 20 years, I think $300 million. That really isn't going to help us because there is no cost of inflation or increase for the cost of inflation in the consideration. So it's something that I think we're going to be having future dialogue about. And then another question was planning level estimate versus design level estimate. So the economist on my team his name is Ermias Wittemichael, and actually there is a project cost planner that the engineers are using now to do cost estimates. It doesn't just take into account historical, but it looks into the future and what the expectations are. So CDOT is trying to actually look ahead as to what a project will cost, which is absolutely, again, extremely critical to cash management, because I'm telling you, nothing is worse than getting in front of the commission and saying, we have an overrun, and we did experience it. And quite frankly, with the new transportation funding bill, that's another component of this. If, like we did with RAMP, we put all of this construction on the road, what do we think? I mean, right? Supply and demand. So we truly expect that it could probably be even higher than the 6%. It depends on how ready the state is, because infrastructure means so much. It just doesn't mean roads, right? And so this is the state legislation, but then also, when we were in Washington, it was the day after President Trump talked about the $1 trillion investment in infrastructure. And there wasn't, I think they were pretty consistent in the conversations that they felt that something was going to happen, but very aware that it wasn't just our highways and bridges and things like that. It went far beyond that. So we certainly don't know how much we might get. But if you think about if this money comes and all of these projects are going at once, we can expect that supplies and labor we'll see a price increase. So we'll get less for more, right? Unfortunately, that's kind of the rule of the game. That's economics, right? 101. Do I have time to just talk about the bill a little bit,
Please.
or are you familiar with it?
No, go ahead and talk about it, please.
So this is the first time I'm talking about it, so I have to read off the piece of paper. I am not an expert by any stretch. So this information is coming from the Loop. It was presented to the commissioners today, and it was in a public setting, so I feel very comfortable sharing it with you. There's nothing, I think, that is anything that needs to be quiet about this. So Speaker Duran, President Grantham, and Senator Baumgartner, and Representative Mitch Bush, they crafted a bipartisan solution to address how our transportation system keeps Colorado moving. So currently, CDOT is evaluating the proposal and what it means. I have a legislative analyst on my team that actually did the fiscal note earlier this week. I reviewed it on Tuesday. There's some pluses and some minuses to this. And I don't mean like good and bad. I mean there's add to revenue and there's some takeaways. So we had the challenge of trying to figure out what this meant overall. So I know that all of you are aware that we're faced with a $1 billion per year funding shortfall. And so CDOT's limited to address congestion, mobility, and safety challenges. And the initiative, in our opinion, has the potential to save lives and improve the state's economic vibrancy. It will fund the projects that address mobility issues on our major highways, as well as rural roads, transit, and transportation choice across the state, and provide local communities the flexibility and resources for their needs. So the proposal is a 0.62% sales tax increase, generating approximately $700 million. I believe that's annually. CDOT, the State Highway Fund, and local governments will benefit from this. There's a $300 million off-the-top bond payment assumption in that. So how the funds will trickle down, I'm looking at like a pyramid now. So this is how the funds will trickle down. $300 million off the top for bond payments. However, the downside is that $50 million of existing CDOT revenue needs to be diverted to these bond payments. So that would probably come from asset management. Okay? So important to hear that message. 30% off, after the off-the-top that I just mentioned is for multimodal optional transit account. That's approximately 17% or $120 million. To the local governments, then, there's 35% after off the top that would go to the cities, approximately $141 million or 20%. And then 35% after off the top to the counties, again, $141 million, 20%. And there's further breakdowns of the pieces that we just talked about. There is a remainder of $50 million from the original $300 million that we would get that could be used for rapid response maintenance types of projects or for other qualified projects. Some of the negatives, so SB 228 would not happen for the next 3 years. So SB 228 is general fund money that legislation approved in 2000, I want to get my years straight, 2016, we received $199 million of general fund. That is currently sitting in the bank, sadly. I mean, we're using the cash for other projects, but we've got to reserve the budget for Central 70. So that's a given. That's been banked. It won't be taken away. We also, we were on tap and had budgeted to receive another $110 million of, $150 million of funds this year. The governor has made a request to legislature, and it still needs to pass, to cut that in half to $79 million, and that would be reserved for I-25 North. So the funds that we either received or plan to receive, hopefully, are reserved for large projects. Other than that, SB 228 will go away if this is passed. The other piece is the faster road safety surcharge, and our share, which is approximately $79 million, would be eliminated.
What about the local faster money?
That I do not know. Can I get back to you?
Please do, because that's a big thing if we lose that funding.
This specifically says CDOT, but I will definitely funnel it through Mike and get back to you.
Thank you.
But if my recollection is correct, I think that fee was being reduced from $25 to $6, I remember reading, so I don't
It
know
has,
what that-
there's a tier with smaller cars and motorcycles and motorcycles. And I don't have this one.
I don't know if it was about the car or the category.
Yeah, there's three different pieces. I don't remember exactly there.
Jennifer?
That percentage off the top for either how it's defined, transit or multimodal, will be very important because if it's really just for transit, there's only certain entities that are really eligible for that, and a lot of that could go to urban areas and not really get to the rural areas, so that's pretty important. I know that has been a concern through CCI and CML, because it kind of makes...
Actually, my understanding is that it would be different than how it works now. It would
Yeah.
not necessarily be just, like RTD would not automatically
Sure.
get their pot. It would be a statewide pot, meaning everybody statewide competes in the same game for those funds.
At least how it was written last week, it wasn't very clear,
Right.
so
Right.
I don't know if they've clarified that, but that's a concern and something to really, I think we need to monitor.
Okay. I can take that back to Herman. and talk. I'll have clarification. Okay. I mean, that's the gist of it.
Which
and I
bill
know-
number is that?
It is House Bill 17-1242.
Thank you.
More to follow.
1242.
That was all I have.
All right. Any other questions for Maria?
Thank you so much.
No, thank you.
Thank you
I
so much.
appreciate, I don't get to visit very often, and I do appreciate the opportunity to meet people. Otherwise, I'm just doing numbers, so I appreciate it. Thank you.
We also appreciate your willingness to even consider a local entity or a local region doing cash management. So we've not decided that that's the way we want to go yet, but we appreciate that you're open to it.
Yeah, no, absolutely. Like I said, it worked for us, and so I know that it can work other places too. So I will tell you, I just to mention, the TC did approve our budget for next, or they adopted our budget today, so it'll go to the governor in April. So another year in the books, 2018. It's like, wow. They just seem to just come around and around and around.
So I think it kind of goes without saying, but always worth reiterating that CDOT's always willing to assist our planning partners such as yourselves in whatever fashion. So we had a long list of issues identified in this conversation, including how do you improve cost estimating? And CDOT has a lot of tools that we can certainly make useful to you, or at least advice that we can provide. So I would consider that, and just always reach out, ask the question, and we'll take it back and see what kind of, what type of tools are actually directly available to you, or just concepts that we can share with you that would help this entity kind of work through, getting closer to real cost estimations and minimizing your overruns. I think that's multifaceted for you, and obviously really important. So.
I'm looking down your list now as you're talking. Can I take a little bit more time? So to your point, Ermias would be more than willing to help in any way. I mean, he lives and breathes this stuff and loves to educate. So please do take advantage if you can. He works for me, so I'd be happy to offer his resources. I noticed on the list, sometimes the RGA process takes longer than anticipated. It pushes things into future years. So you will be happy to know. No, I don't know, maybe you won't be happy to know. Procurement is actually part of my area of responsibility now. It wasn't the previous CFOs, but because of all of the interest that we have in the state of Colorado to build technology into our reliability of travel time and other things, we felt that it was more important to take some of the resources that was used on the procurement side from a leadership perspective, stick it in my area. So I took on a few more challenges, and then open up a resource or funds to allow for a resource in intelligent mobility. And we've recently hired a consultant to assist us with that. The firm is called Zentity, I think. And the thought is that we would grow that where we would have eventually a chief data officer in-house. But you can imagine, it's hard for the state to compete for a resource like that, one individual. So we went the contractor route, but that's pretty exciting. But the reason I mention that is next week, the procurement team is having a workshop on IGA. And I truly hope that we've included some folks, some planning partners in that process so that we're able to address your concerns. Because I know, we've had issues with RFPs, we've had issues with personal services contracts, et cetera, and this is, the IGAs are becoming voluminous, and anything that we can do to help move those along more quickly, we will. Just by some of the reviews that we've done, the workload analysis review that we've done of the RFP process and other things, there are some misconceptions about what's required by the state controller's office and what have you. Just having the dialogue, we think we've been able to cut down time for processing time for documents, and my hope is that the IGA team will come up with a lot of great solutions, too. Always good to look at processes, every couple of years, because things change. And if we keep doing what used to be needed, we don't necessarily need it for not a lot of so hopefully we'll make some progress. So I wanted to point that out, too.
I just want to mention we were contacted to talk about some of our concerns, and so yes, I know that local entities, at least from the county standpoint, we have been contacted. And we've been probably some of the most vocal in regards to that, and so I just want to thank you, and I'm glad to hear it's under your area. So that's something I think, and I said probably a year ago when we met here with Federal Highways, that would probably be the single easiest but biggest step we could take to move some of our projects along quicker. So I appreciate the work that you guys are doing on that.
So when we do the kickoff next week, I'll make sure that I let the team know that, because there's a healthy bit of doubt. When I mention that we have to look at things, the first reaction is, what? Our process is perfect. What are you talking about? But I think they're coming around in understanding that it's not that anything's necessarily wrong. It's just good to take a look at it. And I would be remiss if I didn't mention, because we're talking about IGA, so Bob Corman has moved on to a new endeavor, and I just hired Colette DeSaunier, who worked in the flood recovery business office, to lead procurement and the business office. So I'm excited about the work she's done. She's been with the state for 25 years. She knows the system inside and out. She's got engineering, finance, procurement experience, and she's just a great lady. And so I fully expect that things are going to continue to improve. So.
Great. Well, thank you again for coming down. We appreciate it. And
Thanks for
you're
being
always
receptive.
welcome.
Appreciate it.
Thank you. All right, let's move on to our only action item, 2017 to 2022 TIP Amendment number 8. Kevin?
Good afternoon, Kevin Reyes, Transportation Planner. Today I'm going over the 2017 to 2022 Transportation Improvement Program Amendment number 8. Amendment number 8 is quite large this month. It's coming in 4 different parts from 4 different entities, adding 11 different projects. So I will not read through every project description on here. If you wanted to see the specific descriptions, they are in attachment number 1 of your packet. But I'll just quickly give you a rundown of what the projects are, and I understand that the Copper Ridge Metropolitan District is here, and I think they want to speak a little bit more on their specific project. So the first project is the Copper Ridge Metropolitan District project. They are requesting to add $36,617,000 of its own funds for the design and construction of Phase 1 of North Powers Boulevard. Project number 2 is coming from El Paso County. They are requesting to add $300,000 of federal and local funds of HSIP funds for a road safety audit project on local roads in unincorporated El Paso County area for basically prioritizing safety concerns and developing a plan of action. The third request is coming from Mountain Metro Transit. They are requesting to add its 2015 apportionment of Federal Transit Administration funding program $5310 into fiscal year 2017, and they're also requesting to add 2 faster funded projects in fiscal year 2018. Again, these projects are in attachment number 1 of your packet. And then the last request is from CDOT. They are requesting to add 6 new projects into the TIP. 4 of those projects are funded with HSIP funds, and those are going to be for intersection improvements as well as installing cable barriers. And the last 2 projects from CDOT are funded with CDOT contingency funds. And both of those projects are design projects for CDOT. So that's the kind of the quick rundown on those projects. Again, the Copper Ridge Metropolitan District is going to speak a little bit more specifically on their project. And after they're done with that, I can answer any questions on the rest of the projects if you have specific questions. So I'd invite a representative from there to come up if they're interested.
Thank you. My name is Alex Brown, and for a number of years I served as the financial advisor to the Copper Ridge Metropolitan District and was very involved in developing the plan of finance for this segment of roadway. And since this is, I guess, self-funded, maybe the term, we just wanted to make sure we were clear on the status and nature of funding for this project. This project is in an urban renewal area plan area. The urban renewal plan was approved by the city in 2010. When that was approved, it authorized tax increment financing from both property and sales tax revenue. So within the development area, which is 200 acres, just south of Northgate at the Northgate interchange, as development has been going along, those revenues have been growing, and today we're at about $2 million a year combined from property and sales tax revenue. The property tax revenue is probably about $1.4 million, $1.5 million. Sales tax revenue is today at about $500,000 and growing. To give you a sense of what's occurred in this area, in a tax increment project, you begin with what's called a base for both property and sales, and then all of the income above that base is diverted and available for the project. At inception, there was $30,000 a year in sales tax revenue being generated within this plan area. As I just said, today it's around $500,000 and growing. On the property tax side, the assessed value at the time we started was $1.5 million. Today it's $16.5 million and growing. Getting Phase 1 built, which would run from I-25 to Voyager, will greatly improve access and visibility for other areas of the project and will help us bring in continuing development, which will further grow the property and sales tax base, and that additional future growth is what we will look to help fund Phase 2, although I think today the action item is simply on the Phase 1 from I-25 to Voyager. So we feel very good about the growth that's occurred. The revenue base is not so much projected as it is actually in hand today. The funds are held by the Urban Renewal Authority. There's been a limited amount of spending and work in this corridor. CDOT did come in and do a little bit of grading in the right-of-way. The right-of-way, by the way, has been transferred from the private property owner to the city, so the right-of-way is fully under control of, in a sense, both the city and CDOT. There was some grading work done, and at the direction of the Utilities Department, we did also rebuild some new utilities underneath the right-of-way in contemplation of the final build-out. So that work has been done. There's also some design work that's going to get started through FHU, and recently an updated traffic study was done for the north area, and I understand that traffic report has been made available to the COG, so that data is available for you as well. But again, we just wanted to speak briefly on the nature of the funding source, its status. Would be happy to answer any questions that you may have on this topic.
Wendy.
Who have you contacted for your 1601 permit?
So we are doing that through the regional office. And
Okay.
Mark Andrews.
Just want to make sure that it was,
Yes.
that you knew who to contact.
Yes.
Okay, no problem.
Yep.
Anything else? Any other questions? All right.
Do you have a timeline for the project as far as design and construction?
The design is going to start, we're going to have a kickoff meeting in about 2 weeks, and we expect probably about a 9-month process, so we're hoping to actually get started later this year.
Thanks, Tim.
All right. Thank you.
Thank you.
Alex. Thank you. And are there any other questions for the other three items for this tip amendment?
I would move approval of the tip amendment number 8. Jennifer Urban.
A second?
I'll second Victoria Chavez.
Okay, all in favor? Wendy?
I just have one thing I want to add. The cable rail project is additional money, not a new project, because if it was new, we wouldn't be sitting in traffic.
Which one is this?
The cable rail project on I-25.
Oh. All right. All right, thank you. So we have a motion and a second. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? All right, thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks, Kevin. Okay, item 7A, discussion item on the priority project list. Ken?
Okay, this is about the third month we've been talking about this. Last month, I consolidated the list. Everybody submitted some candidate projects for high priority projects this year. And after a discussion, he asked that I identify how much of a duplication there was. And so I attempted to do that to show the candidate projects, how many were already on the existing projects that the board approved in 2015, how many were also on CDOT's 10-year implementation plan. And there is quite a bit of overlap between that. Now, when we converted spreadsheets into PDF forms to send out in the packet, I'm sure most of you noticed that the PDF program printed off the first half of the spreadsheet and then took the existing columns and spread them over 2 or 3 more pages. So when I handed out to you at the beginning of the meeting, or you picked up at the table up front, was the spreadsheets as you were supposed to be able to see them, with the new column out on the right that shows where there is overlap. You know, is the candidate project on a current priority? Yes, it is. Or no, it's not. Is it on the implementation plan? And yes, it is, or no, it's not. And so you can see that. Otherwise, there's no change to the tables themselves as to what you saw last month. Strictly just that new column showing the overlap. We had discussion about what should be, rather than having 23 priorities, maybe we should have fewer priorities that can be focused on. And I wanted to draw your attention to attachment, I think it's attachment 4 in your packet, but it's the memorandum dated September 14th, 2016, to the Board of Directors. So this was just last September that this item went before the board, and CDOT in July and August had brought their draft 10-year implementation plan, and it went through the committees and it went to the board for discussion and some recommendation. And in the memo, this is, I think, the last memo to the board. You can see in the bottom 2 rows there where there was a difference between what the board had recommended to CDOT, and that there be a split of $25 million to US 24 West and $25 million to I-25 North. And what CDOT had submitted was different. It was a $15-35 million split. This item went through TAC and went through CAC for recommendation, but it was only a discussion item at the board. But here are the 5 that were recommended as the top priorities. And these were all off our November 15th priority list. And I think they're also on the candidate list from this year. So what does it mean that the committee's made a recommendation for a discussion item at the board? and there has been nothing at the board since then. Now, the bills, and Jessica will talk about this more on the next item, but the House Bill 1242 that Maria just talked about, and another one that she'll be talking about, use the CDOT priority list and 10-year implementation plan as the list from which to draw the projects that they're going to fund and pay for. That's their proposal. That's what the draft bills say. Now, they're obviously subject to lots of amendments before they finish the process, but that was their initial draft language. These projects are on CDOT's list.
So let me point out something, though. What you printed here is listed as the 10-year development program, but I want to make clear it's actually the entire development program, not just the Tier 1.
Yeah, there's Tier 1 and Tier 2 on there.
Just want to make sure. So there's two different things. 10-year is what's been prioritized to the top of the entire development program. So you'll see the funding in the Tier 1 funding, Tier 1 total columns. But I'll tell you which ones are actually 10-year development program.
So Tier 1 is the 10 years, correct?
Right.
Right. But these that are listed on this memo that's in here are off of Tier 1. So that was action and discussion and recommendation at TAC last August.
Wasn't the recommendation to reduce it from 25 million to 15 million for the 24 West, and then reduce it from Tier 1 to Tier 2?
The recommendation from PPACG was a 50-50 split. CDOT's Region 2 recommendation to the Transportation Commission was a 35-15 split.
But there wasn't discussion about the tier? I guess not.
Don't know about that.
What I remember, it was left on the Tier 1.
Seems like there was no change, yeah.
Now, there is, not on this 5 here, if you want to consider them the top 5, but CDOT's list does have a couple of projects for 24 West, drainage and intersection improvements up to Woodland Park. Whether we can be flexible and encourage people to interpret what Woodland Park, what you submitted last month, as the reliever route consideration, that might still be possible. Certainly not identified explicitly here, and this was the list I'm looking at was September's discussion at the board.
So are we looking at potentially pulling up that reliever route to the top 5?
Well, it's still a discussion item, so that's a possibility, but.
All right, so where do we go from here? I mean, this is a discussion item, and it probably will be next month too, until we have potentially some new council members for the city. So where do we go from here?
So inside the region, we've been having some conversations about how to figure out what the priority projects are and direction for funding, because we've gotten a couple of sidebar conversations with different members from the board, with Mark and with Karen, Mark Andrew and Karen Rowe. So what Mark is kind of contemplating at this point is to come in and do some type of a presentation at your your executive Friday workshop to work with the executive group to get a agenda item to come back and go through all of the committees, all the way back through the board to go through a process to be able to figure out what those priorities are and what should go forward for funding, or what different types of funding come available. He just had this conversation with me yesterday, so I'm sure it'll be forthcoming from a CDOT perspective, because with all the different options that are coming out at this point, the Trump direction, the legislative direction, they want to be sure that they have the direction that we need to have to be able to go after the right type of funding to fund those priorities. So I'm sure he'll be in touch soon to make that happen.
Well,
So that's kind of the,
Okay. And if he came back to TAC next month, that would be after the city election. Depending on how long he wants to go through, are we expecting a recommendation next month, or would that be the last discussion and information item? Especially if we're still waiting for what's going to happen to these bills and what's going to happen to the Trump bill.
Yeah, I think that would be something that we have to work together going forward. I don't think that, you have to adjust to the situation as it presents itself, but I know he wants to at least start having that conversation.
We had a lengthy discussion, which Mark was part of, at the City, County, State PPACG meeting, and in regards to the same thing, and that was one of the things we discussed, and I'm glad to hear that Mark's moving forward with that, is essentially going back and re-educating, because a lot of our board members are very new, don't really have an understanding about all the corridors that have been cleared as far as the NEPA process, which puts PPACG in a good position in regards to funding if it does come available. We actually, at that meeting, were able to talk about a list of projects, which is actually pretty reflective of the one that Ken pointed out today. There were a couple additional projects on that were discussed, and I know that Mark was kind of going to go back because there was a couple projects he wanted to get updated costs on before he came forward. So I don't know if he was ready to bring that project list to the TAC next month, but I do know that I think, again, last month I said it, in my opinion, I think that this is pretty simple to look at our highest priorities in the region, and I think that this list is very close to that from my perspective. So I think it might be good for maybe us to go back to our respective entities and look and see what we think our priorities are, and come back ready for discussion with maybe what we think is our top 5 or 6 priorities, so that maybe we can kind of get there, because I don't think that we're very far apart. I guess that's what my suggestion would be.
So we put this with Mark, your comment and Mark coming together, or, if Mark's not ready next month, do we wait till the following month, or what?
Yes.
Yes.
Okay.
We wait.
It's all on Mark.
It's all on Mark, okay.
It's all about
I'll
the
make sure
Mark
he knows
show.
that. I'll pass that information.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks, Ken, for putting these lists together, though. I think it's really helpful.
Yep, thank you. Good suggestion, Jennifer. Thank you. Thank you all. All right. Item 7B, 2017 Colorado Legislative Session Update. Jessica.
I ended up with a silent microphone. So I'm here this month, because I missed last month presenting. Ken and Bethany handled it for me. So you all should be getting an email from me every Friday that is the list of new bills for discussion. As of right now, the new bills last week were House Bill 1242, that we discussed earlier, House Bill 1222, which is a caregiver support tax fund checkoff, and Senate Bill 17213 concerning automated driving motor vehicles. The Legislative Committee took all the comments that we received from other committees and discussed these on Monday, as they do every week at 4 p.m. You're all invited to those. You can call in or attend. It's in that information when I send you the link. The legislative subcommittee is suggesting that we monitor House Bill 1242. They had some concerns with how the mobility infrastructure was phrased and concerns about its ability to be applicable to rural areas. They wanted to oppose Senate Bill 213 unless amended because of how it currently restricts the right of local governments to make regulations relating to it. I know that the Chamber and EDC did choose to support this bill, but the PPACG Legislative Subcommittee is suggesting oppose. And House Bill 1222, they suggested support. All this does is add a check off to the tax return forms for the state of Colorado as soon as there is an available space for the Family Caregiver Support Fund, which is something our Area Agency on Aging gets a lot of benefit from. Does anyone have any questions about any of these bills or any comments or thoughts?
I have a question. So all the numbers that she was mentioning on 1242, pluses and minuses, has anyone gone through and added up all the pluses and minuses and see how it comes out in the wash, if we're ahead or behind or just different?
The bill was originally intended to be revenue neutral, which means it would come out completely in the wash.
Okay.
It currently does not, but both Senator Grantham and Representative Duran, yes, that's the one I'm looking for, have both said that they expect, anticipate, and look forward to a variety of amendments on this bill as they attempt to find a compromise that both parties will be able to vote for.
So is it higher or lower at the moment, since it's not?
At the
usually-
moment, it increases the revenue for transportation overall.
So in your humble opinion, or someone's humble opinion, is this just a different way to distribute the funds that is someone wants to tweak?
The legislative subcommittee looked at it, and just remember, this is a ballot question. So there's the first part of this. This is one of 4 ballot questions we've currently got bills proposed for. It wants to create this new sales and use tax and pretty much eliminate the faster car increase. So it will, so far as I can tell, all of the new faster funds that have happened in the last, I want to say 8 years since faster got instituted, will go away. It will go back to being just what car registration fees were before. Now, that may be a misinterpretation, but that is how I've been told it's going to work thus far. And the goal is to create a higher level of funding for transportation, as well as allow the mobility that people are really wanting and needing to get these things done. Pretty much.
Is there a cap on it, or as the funds come in and increase year after year, is this, are they going to give the funds to CDOT, or is it going to be a new entity? Does no one know the answer to that yet?
They would go to CDOT. And then the other half of them would go through the Highway Users Tax Fund.
So I'm hoping.
Yeah. So
Okay.
there are no new organizations created
Okay.
by it, but
But if there is an increase above and beyond their neutral at this point in time, would those funds go to CDOT, or would they?
so they're not specifying the amount of funds they would raise. They're specifying which percentage of funds would go where.
Right.
So the top, this many percent goes to CDOT,
Right.
and then this much of a percentage goes to local government, and then this much of a percentage goes to mobility. They're not saying what the amounts are.
Okay. So as it grows,
It will
this
continue to grow,
percentages
and
stay the
more
same.
will go to CDOT, more will go to the local, more will go to mobility.
Okay. Thank you.
The problem I see at this point with this bill is getting rid of those faster fundings. For us, that's a little over $2 million a year that we're currently receiving that would go away. And I'm not sure what the percentage of that $141 million that goes to counties. I don't know that it would be a wash. I don't know if we'd get less. My guess is, given the $300 million off the top, and then the $120 million for the multimodal, my guess is that number would go down for the county. And that would be a huge concern, because we're already, creating our budgets for this year and the year after that based on that $2 million in faster revenues. That is a huge concern for us.
And I will say that, as they've said, they have not specified, and they are still anticipating amendments. This is one that everybody is keeping a close eye on. It is scheduled next to be heard again on March 22nd. The fiscal note on it is not available yet,
which.
But unfortunately, the fiscal notes generally just go into the state impacts, and they don't go into the impacts to local government. So it's sort of left to us to figure that out and then communicate those issues up.
I would just say that both CCI and CML are in a monitoring stage. They haven't determined whether to support or oppose these. So I think we're all, I mean, this is brand new. It just dropped. We're all still trying to figure it out and monitor it. And I guess that's what we just need to continue to do.
Yeah. And that is part of what everybody's trying to do right now, is let people see what they see as potential problems so that the bill's authors will start addressing those things. So it would be important for everybody's individual lobbyists, county, to talk about their concerns with those faster fees.
And then, are you also looking at 17205 Senate bill? Which is a similar funding to the 1242, but slightly different. It has
Multimodal
5.
transportation
Yes.
The legislative
Oh, thank
subcommittee
you.
voted to oppose it, and that was ratified by the board on the 8th.
Thank you. Appreciate that.
They felt that it would detract from the ability to pass something locally that would have more impact along statewide roads and would damage our likelihood of getting ballot issues passed that really will benefit the whole state.
Okay.
If anybody has any information or wants to add any things in, please send them to me throughout the week. I really want their input.
Okay.
Jessica drug me along to a meeting last Friday afternoon that was sponsored by Representative Carver, who proposed a bill, House Bill 1171, which got assigned to the Kill Committee. I think it's the Military and Veterans Affairs Committee or something like that. And what's a transportation bill doing there? So that's why they call it the Kill Committee. But rather than getting killed off in the first couple of weeks, which I guess is normal, it got postponed until late March before any action's taken on it. So, she was guessing that some of these other actions and things that were going on, wouldn't necessarily resurrect or save her bill, but maybe some concept out of it would come. But it was also a funding bill to use CDOT's 10-year implementation plan, the priority list, and fund that. But rather than raising taxes, it was just a redistribution of existing funds within the state, taking it from other general purpose and putting it on transportation. But some of the comments that were made by attendees there, and Jennifer, you were there, you can help me remember, there were concerns about, from the rural areas, about areas that have already taxed themselves, such as we have with the RTA, and Fountain has its own tax, and Colorado Springs has its RTA and 2C tax. That, why would these entities vote for another state tax, and raise their local taxes and hurt their business competitiveness? So that was some of the concerns, especially from the rural areas of the state, that she passed on. Others were concerned about the percentage of money going to transit, and the only entities that were going to benefit from the transit was going to be the Front Range, not the rural areas of the state. So they had some concerns of whether the bill would, how well it would be supported, and obviously.
Are you talking about Carver's bill or 1242?
1242. Yeah, hers is sitting in the Kill Committee.
Okay, I just want to make sure I missed the transition.
Not really. So she explained the two bills, and the individual, can't remember his name, that sponsored 1242. He was traveling and was going through the mountains in western Colorado and was going to call in, but couldn't get in, so she spoke for him and tried to represent him.
Tried to join us up, but wasn't able to.
Yeah. So it was very interesting and informative meeting. So it's definitely, as written, is not everybody's answer, but it's going to have some impacts. And I have the CML right up here, and that you're mentioning, and it does say that city and county fees will be reduced to the cities, and, from the faster registration.
All right. Anything else? All right, thank you. Thanks, Jessica. All right, item 8A, TAC meeting materials. Ken?
Hey, Brian, if I might
Yes.
interrupt before you move on.
Yes.
I'm going to take my nameplate here and retire it for good as your tech planning liaison. I do have to step out. So I think I sent an email to all of you to let you know that I've accepted a position in the Division of Transit and Rail. This is my final TAC meeting as a planning liaison. I hope to be talking to you in just a completely different conversation going forward, but it's been a pleasure, and I wish you all the best. Please contact me if there's any follow-up questions, and my team is always there to help in the same fashion. So, thank you.
I would like to say thank you. You've been a lifesaver to me for the last 3 months, and I have certainly appreciated it, and wish you well.
Thank you very much.
Wish you weren't leaving.
Thanks.
Yeah, good luck. Thank you, Michael.
Thank you.
Congratulations, Michael.
Thank you.
All right, Ken, TAC meeting materials.
Okay, we're going to try to make sure our TAC packets go out on time every week and or every month to you, and we've redivided some of the duties and stuff, and so to get things done on time and fit everybody's work schedule, going to ask that all the TAC materials be provided to us no later than Friday before the mail out. If you have an agenda item that you know that's going to come forward before that, feel free to notify us or notify Brian that you want this agenda item on there. Even if you don't have the materials, at least we can start creating the flow and getting that arrangement. But the Wednesday before the mail out is typically the board meeting and the RTA meeting in the afternoon, and Beth I twisted her arm into doing the minutes in the packet for us, and she's tied up in all of those meetings that day, and so she has to do Tuesday as her preparation day, and so if we get materials 5 o'clock Friday, it gives us one part of another day to work and get the materials together in a format that she can then start assembling it and we can get it. So I would ask your indulgence on that. And in your memos, in your description of what's going on, just all the questions I had, who, what, why, when, where, how. We don't have very much time to track people down, and if they're out of the office, and then we've got the packet going out with material that's not fully explained, and we don't know the answer either. So we would just ask that we all work together to improve the quality of the packet material to the committees and the board.
So the mail out is always the Thursday before the TAC meeting.
Right.
And you want materials the Friday before mail out. Okay. Sounds good.
I personally think if you get something that isn't complete, don't accept it. And I know my people are some of the guiltiest of the group, so don't accept it. If they need something done, they'll either get it together and get it to you complete, or they won't get it.
So
I mean, honestly, that's
Wendy
fair.
said,
Wendy
get
said.
your act together.
Get your act together.
Let it be written. Yeah.
She's on tape. She's on tape.
Okay.
All right, Brandy?
And I know exactly what you're talking about. So it's not fair that you're sitting here at 5 o'clock trying to cultivate information, and you're having folks that you're having to keep when they need to go home. It's not fair.
We'll work
So I
together.
appreciate it.
Thank you.
Brandy?
Yeah, I just wanted to say, I don't know if it was our last meeting or the meeting before, we had 3 or 4 items from CDOT that had no cover sheets. So I said, Ken, it's great that we have all this information, but why do we have this information? So.
What is it?
Right, so thank you for that, Wendy.
Yeah, it wasn't me.
We weren't blaming you, we were just curious.
But the thing is, I have no control over it. So if I don't have a stick that I can say, if you send this in looking like this, they're not going to accept it, and you're not getting anywhere, then that gives me the stick I need to make them do the work that they need to do, because I can only ask. I can't make them do it.
Sure, sure. Got that, Ken?
That's all I have.
All right,
I'll
thank
make
you.
Brian the bad guy. Brian's not going to take it.
All right. Member entity announcements. Randy?
I don't have an announcement as a member entity, but I did attend the board meeting in place of Brian and Victoria, who are both on vacation. And one thing that had been discussed offline was the order of the board meetings and how our TAC report is after the board members vote. So I just wanted to let all the board members know if they have any questions, you can ask Brian or Victoria or myself or whoever's representing the TAC that day when that item comes up for a vote. And they reassured me that that will be their process. So if that doesn't happen, they've been made aware of the opportunity that they have. So I just want to let everybody know in case they go to a board meeting and wonder why our report is after the board has already voted. That's it. Thanks.
I would just add the comment that was made is that also if it's a unanimous vote, usually they're not expecting anything. But I know as the chair, when that change was made, when we had an issue or a non-unanimous vote, I was able to get up during those specific items and just give them some background as to why the TAC voted the way we did. So I think they want to hear from us, and as we all know, they really take our recommendations, not only from the TAC, but the CAC very seriously. So, and y'all have been doing a great job, so thank you.
And that goes the same for different recommendations from both committees. I mean, if anything's called into question or they have questions, that usually for those who do read the packet, they will call us up to answer those questions.
You mean they don't all read the packet?
That's what I've heard. I don't know. Any other member entity announcements?
I would just mention, I'm pretty excited. We have 2 projects that we received notice of award and approval to move forward with an award on. So we are moving forward on those projects. So money is getting spent. And thank you for all of your help on many of these projects, Wendy.
Which ones are those, Jennifer?
Sorry, it's our oil well bridge, very much out east, and our Holtwood Bridge, which is actually on the county line, very out east. So 2 1935 timber bridges that need to be replaced. So.
All right. Items for our next meeting.
Which is Tuesday.
Mark Andrew.
Mark Andrew.
Our next real TAC meeting, yeah, that's a good point. We have a special TAC meeting on Tuesday to go over the goals. We just had PPACG just hosted a workshop on Monday, right? And so is the response been pretty good? Do we have a lot of TAC members attending on Tuesday, do you know?
I haven't heard.
I don't think I can be there.
Okay.
Yeah, it's pretty good.
Yeah, all right. All right. But, so items for our next regular TAC meeting, we'll probably have a tip amendment, most likely, right? More discussion on priority project list?
Only if Mark's ready.
Yeah,
Yeah, I'll talk to Mark
sure.
and see where he's at, if they're ready to move forward, and I'll have him get in touch so that we can get the right
Mm-hmm.
committees scheduled so that they know where they have to be and who, what, where, when, and how.
All right,
Who needs to be in attendance.
okay. And then we'll be making a recommendation on the goals based on what comes out of next Tuesday's meeting, right? For the board to consider in May?
Right.
So, okay.
And then those will go to CAC as well next month?
Mhm.
Yes? Or later this month? Later in the month?
Yeah, that's the reason for the
Okay.
special meeting, is that to keep things in the normal
In
flow,
sync?
that
Okay.
TAC would have some chance to consider it and see it and
Okay.
pass that on to CAC. CAC has then time, a few weeks to do their communication with their constituency, however they do that. And we get some feedback from them, and so then that'll come to the full TAC at their normal meeting next month. And hopefully we can pull it all together for a recommendation on goals.
Yeah, and I just wanted to thank you and staff. Brandy and I were there from the TAC, and there were probably, I don't know, 20 or 25 people there, some CAC members and chamber people, and pretty good representation from the community. And, you guys broke them out into themes, and I think, were there 17 or 18 themes? But there was a lot of consensus. There were some small group activities, and boards of all of those 17 themes or 18 themes were, what was it, 18. We had 18. We whittled it down to 15. And then we had to, well, as a starting
It's
point.
still too many.
But no, there was a lot of
These weren't goals.
No.
These weren't goals. All we were doing was taking
themes
the
from the
major
survey.
themes from the comments we received from the survey.
Yeah.
So converting those to goals will be what's going on at the next
Yeah.
TAC meeting.
Yeah, but a lot of good movement and discussion about, there was a lot of duplication, and there were a lot of items that could fit under, one goal, like there was accessibility, connectivity, mobility, multimodal, and
List
so.
all 18, I'll be impressed.
Yeah. And there was some talk about, CDOT's long-range transportation plan has four goals: mobility, safety,
Economic development.
and
Something else.
Yeah. So there was some movement toward going down from that list, which is just incredibly hard to, for basically, all of us to wrap our head around, but then when we're looking for comments from the public, it's even more mind-boggling for them to understand it. And then, so it was really good, well-organized and well-presented, and so thanks for that.
Kudos to Jennifer and Kevin on those.
Yeah. All right. Anything else? Okay. Thank you all for coming. We'll see you next month and next Tuesday.
Tuesday, to be specific.
Okay, have fun.
All right, see you, Bob.
Back up to the top. See you guys.
Thank you, Jen. Thank you. Thank you. No. Thank you. Good teacher.
I put my emails out.
Your deputy, Anton? Is he going to take your place? Your alternate? Or?
There's a letter that we have
Hopefully that'll help you.
I do.